Good evening and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget. It is Wednesday, July 10th, year of our Lord 2024. Been away from the show a little bit. Had the 4th of July holiday weekend and then just took some time off. This is kind of the dog days of sports, just ended the NBA season and now moving slowly into the football season, which will start in a little over a month, actually a little over 2 months actually for the NFL, a little less than 2 months for college football. But I'm a baseball fan, just don't cover it as much as I used to. This show is going to be mostly about the NBA and then college football. Pretty big show for you today. Let's go ahead and dive into the topics. Remember, if you like the audio version of this podcast, you can find it on places like Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts, basically wherever you can get your audio podcast. If you prefer the video version, just look up Sports Talk on a Budget on YouTube and like and subscribe to the show right down here. But like I said, let's go ahead and dive into the topics. Just two topics today. One is going to be in the NBA, and of course, we ended the season a couple weeks ago. I did my reaction to the Celtics win the NBA championship. After that, we had free agency and trades. So I'm going to go over my top winners and losers of the NBA offseason so far, and just some of the under the radar moves that I like that maybe don't get as much publicity as some of the bigger ones, but moves that I think can really help out the teams that these players went to. And then my last topic, I'll go to college football and just what is going on at USC. I'm a USC fan. The hat's actually a little bit above the screen here. You can't see it right now, but big USC fan. And USC isn't acting like USC right now. They've been kind of in a transition phase here with Lincoln Riley going into his third year. Going to talk about what's going on. They've lost recruits. They've fallen behind on the recruiting trail. Just going to talk about what's going on there and kind of the state of the program at the moment as well. But like I said, we'll go ahead and start in the NBA, and let's move to my first topic, and that is going to be my winners and losers of the NBA offseason so far. My first winner is the team that got the biggest prize of the free agency and offseason period so far, and that is going to be the Philadelphia 76ers and them signing Paul George. But not just signing Paul George, also the Philadelphia 76ers extending Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey has become a star in this league. I think he can ascend even higher and maybe end up being maybe the best player on this team, even with Joel Embiid and Paul George being on the team. But let's go ahead and look at the Paul George signing. I thought he would stay with the Clippers. I thought the Clippers had the most to offer him. He's from LA. He's played with the Clippers for a while now. The Clippers are moving into a new arena that's going to be by the Forum in Inglewood there, also by SoFi Stadium. I thought, you're moving into a new stadium. Your biggest star, Kawhi Leonard, is probably the most unreliable athlete in North America at this point. He just withdrew from the Olympics, which was the most unsurprising news of all time, but that's a topic for another day. But you're moving into a new arena. You re-sign and bring back James Harden. Kawhi Leonard's under contract. I thought they would bring back Paul George. They don't. Paul George gets the max contract from this Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know if he's a max player at this point. He's going to be about 34, 35 years old. This is his fourth team. He started obviously with the Pacers, then moved to the Thunder, then to the Clippers, and now to the 76ers. I still don't think this is a move that puts him over the top when it comes to the Celtics. I think the Celtics are still a better and deeper team. But this is a very good move to kind of, I think, maybe put them in contention for that 2 seed in the East with the New York Knicks. So I think that puts them in contention with the 2 seed with the New York Knicks. Solid move. Paul George is still a very solid player. He's a guy that is willing to take a lesser role and knows he is not the number one option. He wasn't the number one option for the Clippers, and even when he was in OKC with Russell Westbrook, he was not the number one option. Russell Westbrook was. So, guy who knows his role. He's an unselfish player, still a very good defender, still a guy that can knock down a three and create his own shot when he needs to. So, solid pickup for the 76ers. Like I said, I don't think it puts them over the edge over the Celtics, but I think definitely puts them in contention with the Knicks for that 2 seed in the East. Number 2 winner I have is going to be the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks made some other kind of small moves that I thought were good for them as well. But the thing that I thought this team was lacking, you saw it show up big time in the NBA Finals when they just had so many guys that couldn't hit spot up threes and open threes. I mean, how many open threes did we see this Dallas Mavericks team miss in the NBA Finals? They needed a guy that you could rely on that could still knock down threes. and they just signed one of the best three-point shooters of all time, and that's Klay Thompson. Now, he's not what he used to be. He's not a shell of himself either, but he's not what he used to be. Still averaging about 17, 18 points a game, still shooting about 40% from three per game as well. So solid pickup for the Dallas Mavericks, and he's a guy who's a great catch-and-shoot player, and when you have Luka Doncic, it's kind of like your distributor on your team, one of the better distributors in all of the NBA. He averages about 8 to 11 assists every year. So he'll get the ball to Klay Thompson in good spots. Klay Thompson is a guy who's played in big games, obviously 4-time NBA champion, big moments, made big shots. He is a guy that they could rely on in big moments down the stretch, and that is a huge pickup for the Dallas Mavericks, especially because this is a team that plans on continuing to contend for NBA titles like they did this year. And then my last one is actually going to be a sign and a trade, and that is going to be with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that is them trading for Alex Caruso, and then them signing Isaiah Hartenstein from the New York Knicks. We're going to start with Hartenstein. Hartenstein is a very good defensive big, and he's a physical big. And what the Thunder were missing, they have their big man in Chet Holmgren, but he's not a great physical big man just because his size and his stature. He's very slender, as a lot of people talked about him coming into the draft. He's just a slender guy. He's not a guy that's going to bang around with guys like, Gaffer and Lively in the Dallas series just pushed him around. Jokic would push him around. Guys in the East like Giannis and Embiid would push him around. So he's not a guy that you can rely on to be that physical presence down low on defense and in the offensive rebounding game as well. That's where Isaiah Hartenstein comes in, and I think fits perfectly on that team. And then you look for the trade with Alex Caruso. You send Josh Giddey away. Josh Giddey looked like a promising player for the Thunder for a while, but kind of fell off and did not have a good playoffs, especially in that Mavericks series. You get out Alex Caruso. He's a guy who can knock down a three. He's also a very good defender, fits in with this team really well. I like this OKC Thunder team a lot, and I think as of right now, I would have the Thunder as the favorites in the West. Of course, a lot of things can happen between now and the beginning of the season. Injuries can happen in the regular season as well, of course, but I think this Thunder team is poised to be a really good team for a very long time. They have one of the best players in the league as their leading player, say Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then there's just the pieces they have around them. They're kind of like a poor man's Celtics is how they're built. But these players are getting better and better, and maybe they can rival the Celtics in a few years. And who knows, maybe that's the NBA Finals matchup next year. So those are my winners of the NBA offseason, NBA free agency, and offseason so far. But of course, with winners has to come losers, and we're going to start in the West. And my first loser is the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets couldn't re-sign a key piece to their team last year in Bruce Brown and lost him in free agency. That happens again this offseason. You lose KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He goes on to the Orlando Magic. I'll talk about that move a little bit later. He goes on to Orlando Magic. He's a guy who can knock down shots. He's been in big games, won a championship with the Lakers, obviously won a championship a couple of years ago with the Nuggets as well, but can knock down a shot, plays really good defense, and is just a good role player that knows his role. And it's just another role player, a good role player that this Denver Nuggets team has lost. And with teams like the Mavericks, like the Thunder, like the 76ers in the East, the Celtics aren't going anywhere. They brought everybody back. Teams that are in that upper echelon, that championship contender tier, most of them got better so far this offseason. The Denver Nuggets, I would argue, gotten worse just by they haven't signed anybody of significance, and they lost KCP, who I thought was a good role player for them as well. They were a team, they're very kind of Jokic-centric, and then you see what you get from Jamal Murray on a night-in, night-out basis. He was very inconsistent in this playoffs this past year, so I think the Nuggets got worse. They were a team that we thought could potentially be a dynasty after they won the finals last year, and they could be a one-and-done team, and I think they're the third, potentially fourth best team in the West as we stand right now. And then we're going to stay out west, and that's going to be the Los Angeles Lakers. And for the Lakers, no significant signings outside of re-signing LeBron James. You knew that was going to happen, but you miss out on Klay Thompson. You miss out on DeMar DeRozan. I don't think they have the capital, whether it's trades or money, to trade for a guy like Lauri Markkanen from the Jazz. So it looks like they're going to swing and miss on all the potential free agents they could get this offseason. They never were in on Paul George, and that never was going to happen. They didn't even get Buddy Hield. They couldn't even get consolation prizes at this time. No significant signings outside of re-signing LeBron James. Obviously, re-signing LeBron James is huge. He supposedly was going to take a pay cut if they were able to get someone like a Klay Thompson or someone else of that stature. That was never really a threat. Klay Thompson didn't really want to play for the Lakers, which I find a little eye-opening there, since his dad is not only an announcer for the Lakers, but also played for the Lakers in the 80s as well and won a championship with the Lakers in the 80s as well. So that's a little bit puzzling there. But either way, the Lakers just swing and miss. And the state of the Lakers right now is they have the brand notoriety, but that might be it, because they're one of the poorest teams in the league as far as ownership goes, because the Buss family does not have near the capital of most of the owners in the NBA. Rob Pelinka, the jury's still out on if he's even a good GM. A lot of the moves that they've made in the past, most people credit to LeBron, whether they're good or bad. And he really only has his job because he was Kobe Bryant's agent. So the state of the Lakers is not good right now. They're a team that I think they're a play-in team next year, maybe sneak in to a 6th seed at best, but I think they're a play-in team. And if they have any injuries, LeBron James is going to be 40 by the time the season comes around, or somewhere in the season. Anthony Davis is a guy playing a lot of games last year, going to be playing in the Olympics this year, not going to have a whole lot of rest in this offseason. He's a guy, of course, that is injury prone, so not a good outlook for the Lakers. I don't mind that, of course, being a Celtics and just a Boston fan, but still not a good outlook and not a great offseason at all. You pair that with the kind of puzzle with them drafting Bronny James. That's a conversation for another day. But either way, not a great offseason for the Lakers so far. And then we're going to stay in LA, and I'm going to go with the Clippers. Clippers, you lose Paul George. You're probably going to end up having to trade Russell Westbrook. You bring back James Harden just because you really didn't have any other choice. Whatever's left of James Harden, he's kind of not a shell of himself, but he's not nowhere near the player he was at one point. And then what are their significant signings? No significant signings of anything. You're moving into a new arena. Your number one star in Kawhi Leonard is still the most unreliable athlete, I believe, in North America at this point, like I said earlier. So just not a good offseason for either LA team, whether it is the Lakers or the Clippers. Both missed out on big signings. And in the Clippers scenario, you don't bring back your second best player, I think, at this point in all of their careers. So it's been a rough offseason so far for LA basketball. We'll see if these teams are able to make a splash trade or anything significant before the season starts. There's not a ton left as far as free agency goes. Not a ton on the trade market either outside of Lauri Markkanen from the Jazz. But they're going to be asking for a lot because that's what Danny Ainge does. So we'll see if they're able to change the narrative in LA with either of those teams, but I'm just not seeing it. Wanted, before I move to my last type of the day, just to go over some of the more underrated moves. First one I want to highlight is DeJounte Murray being traded from the Atlanta Hawks to the New Orleans Pelicans. I like this move a lot. This probably ends up making them having to trade, so that could be another potential target for the Lakers or Clippers or other teams, Brandon Ingram. But now you pair DeJounte Murray, who I think is a very good guard, good defensive player, solid shooter as well. You pair him with a guy like CJ McCollum, who's a lights-out shooter. You still have Zion Williamson. That team is getting better and better. They need a little bit more size down low. Hopefully they can address that in free agency, since they didn't really exactly address that in the draft. But either way, you add good pieces there. And DeJounte Murray, I think, is a guy who's kind of been lost a little bit in Atlanta since him and that Trae Young experience did not really work. They made the playoffs once, were bounced in the first round by the Celtics last year. So we'll see if he's able to kind of be that guy we thought he would be when he was in San Antonio before he was traded. I like the fit with CJ McCollum and Zion Williamson. Like I said, they could use them, they're big, but still a solid move and just another team in the deep West that I think could leave the Clippers and Lakers behind and maybe make that that six seed playoff spot. Chris Paul goes from the Golden State Warriors to the San Antonio Spurs. Now, Chris Paul is 39 years old. He doesn't have a lot left in the tank as far as his skill set goes. He still is a very good passer, still can knock down a mid-range shot. But what he is going down there to do is to help develop Victor Wembanyama, who's supposed to be, and I think is going to be, the next face of the NBA. So that's what Chris Paul is going down there to do. The lobs are probably going to be unbelievable. I think Wembanyama's numbers are going to go up just because Chris Paul is great at getting bigs the ball in the right spot that they want. So I think that's really going to help Victor Wembanyama. We talked about this a little bit earlier. KCP goes to Orlando. I like what Orlando's building down there with Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner. Have a good young nucleus going on. Jalen Suggs building around that. You get a guy like KCP who's won a couple of titles, veteran guy, can really help in that locker room because they are a very young locker room. And then the last underrated move that I liked was DeMar DeRozan going to the Sacramento Kings. Just another team in the West that I think can contend for a play-in or that 6 seed playoff spot. You add him to guys like Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. I think that's a decent big three. Now, DeRozan is not your modern-day player. He's not a great three-point shooter. He's more of your old-school mid-range shooter, but he's still a guy that can give you 20 points a night. He's a reliable player. I think he played in the most minutes in the league last year. Even at his age, he's still a reliable guy. You know what you're going to get from him. He's a willing defender, not a great defender, but he's a willing defender, and still a very good to above average player, good veteran presence to have, good leadership player. He wanted to be on the West Coast. He's from Southern California, not going to be in Southern California, but going to be closer there, of course, Sacramento. I like that piece. I don't think that puts them over the top as like a championship contender, but they're definitely a playoff contender right now in the West as well. And the West is a very deep conference. So, like I said, those are my winners and losers of the NBA offseason. Some of the under the radar moves. Been an okay NBA offseason. The NBA offseason usually has a little bit more fireworks than it's had so far this offseason. The biggest move is probably Paul George. But still a solid NBA offseason, and it really doesn't disappoint. NBA free agency in the offseason is always usually pretty exciting. And then we'll go ahead and finish off the show with my last topic, and that is going to be what is going on at USC. And a lot of people are like, well, what is going on at USC? Well, the biggest thing for USC right now is they got to bounce back from that season last year. They finished the regular season 7-5. You finish it 8-5 after winning the bowl game, the Holiday Bowl versus Louisville. Looked good in the Holiday Bowl, but a lot of people don't really take that to heart anymore. They don't really buy a lot of stock from bowl games anymore. As it, basically, if it's not a playoff bowl game, most people don't put any stock into it. Even though Louisville played most of their guys, only had a few opt-outs. It still wasn't. It was a good momentum into the offseason, but it wasn't exactly what I was expecting the reaction to be, because in the past you have that kind of bowl game performance like they had. Miller Moss 6 touchdowns, threw it all over the yard. Defense looked better. You probably get a lot bigger reactions, but now people look at bowl games and are like, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how your offseason goes. We'll see how your spring game goes, and then we'll see how you do at the beginning of next season, of course. But the bigger news right now for USC is more on the recruiting trail. And USC started off this past class, this 2025 class, especially going into the year, on fire. They signed 3 guys in March that were top 100 guys, and 2 5-stars in Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson, another 4-star in Drake Stubbs, all on the defensive side. All 3 of these guys are on the defensive side, all from the Southeast, all 3 were from Georgia, and USC looked like they had a lot of momentum. Those 3 guys all decommit. I think Gibson's already recommitted to Georgia at this point. And right now USC is sitting at 24th, either 22nd or 24th in the 24/7 composite recruiting rankings, and that's the site I like to use the most. They're hovering around the mid-20s at this point in recruiting rankings. And the thing that's the biggest alarm for me is what Lincoln Riley's strategy has been for recruiting is he wants to get out of California, get to the Southeast, get to Florida, get to Texas, and recruit some of the big boys. Because, yes, California has a ton of great athletes in high school, whether those are quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, defensive backs. They don't have great players for the trenches, whether that be defensive line or offensive line. And that's where a lot of games are won. So I get the plan and the strategy to get out of California and get some of those bigger guys, and you have to, but you can't completely forget about California. And that's what's happening right now. He only has, right now in the class, there's only 3 players in his current class that are or 4 players in his current class that are from California, and he's missing out on top end players. I want to say Texas A&M has more 4 stars out of California than USC does. That should never be the case. I don't care how much NIL money Texas A&M has. That should never be the case. And then they only had 6 in their entire class in 2024. And you had 24 commits from the 2024 class, and you only end up with 6 out of California. Yes, you did decent around the country, but you got to do better in the state of California. I know that they don't have the trenches and the big guys in stock like the other states, but they have the skill positions, and you still have to recruit your own state. That's what Pete Carroll did. And that now when Pete Carroll was there, they had better trench players back in the day, but either way, he was getting the best skill players from California, and that's how USC was able to build their early dynasty in the early 2000s. So that is a major issue there. And what I also think is happening, especially on the defensive side with recruits when it comes to USC, is they're in a wait-and-see mode. And what I mean by they're in a wait-and-see mode is they want to see how this new defensive staff under D'Anton Lynn, Eric Henderson comes over from the Rams. You bring in Doug Belk from Houston, who was their defensive coordinator to be the DB coach. You bring in Matt Entz, who was the head coach at North Dakota State, to be your linebacker coach. You keep Sean Nua as your defensive line coach to go along with Eric Henderson. So they knocked it out of the park as far as their hires, and I think they're going to be improved on the defense and just get better and better as the years go on the defensive side. Under D'Anton Lynn, look what he did last year, just in year 1 with UCLA, but still, I think a lot of these recruits are wait-and-see mode. So if USC looks better on the defensive side, you could see obvious strides. They're playing a lot better on the defensive side. Maybe they're able to land some of those defensive recruits or maybe get back some of the defensive recruits they lost. But I think they need to see that proof of concept. They need to see that progress on the defensive side because Lincoln Riley is a great offensive head coach, great at coaching quarterbacks, has put multiple number 1 picks, multiple Heisman Trophy winners, but he has never really had an above average defense, let alone an average defense, which was nowhere to be found these last 2 years in USC. So I think the defensive recruits are waiting to see. Lincoln Riley will probably end up finishing in the top 15 just because they'll land the offensive recruits they need. I think Julian Lewis, the 5-star quarterback that they have committed so far, will end up staying with USC because when it comes to quarterbacks, you might as well go play under Lincoln Riley. You're almost guaranteed a Heisman Trophy visit and a top 5 pick in the NFL draft because that's what he does with his quarterbacks. So I don't see why Julian Lewis wouldn't commit there. But like I said, I think with the defensive recruits they've lost and some that haven't committed there, they need to see more of a proof of concept. If USC can be better on the defensive end, maybe they get some of those guys, and then maybe they can get more defensive recruits and be in more defensive recruiting battles going forward. And then last question for USC is, where is the NIL? Because the NIL is everything, not only when it comes to high school recruiting, but transfer portal recruiting right now in college football. And you know Texas A&M has great NIL. You know Georgia has great NIL, and they have the results on the field. Oregon has great NIL with the backing of Phil Knight and Nike. Ohio State just revamped their NIL, so they're going to be really good on that end, and they have the results on the field as well. So where is USC at? Because USC was supposed to be a powerhouse in this NIL era. You're in LA. You have all of these big companies and big brands around LA. You thought, okay, well, they'll have plenty of money to move around. It doesn't seem like that. It doesn't seem like the people there are aligned with having USC football as the number 1 priority for the athletic department at USC, because USC football, just like most programs and most universities, the football program pays for everything else. And when USC football is doing well, they fill the Coliseum. They get a lot of backing, even in a saturated market in LA. They get a ton of backing as well. So it's not there on the NAL side. That's not on Lincoln Riley. That's on the donors and the athletic department for USC to get that on track. I'm going to wait and see mode as a USC fan. I'm hopeful. I think they'll be better on the defensive side with the defensive hires that they made. I don't know what the offensive side, I don't think it'll be better because you don't have Caleb Williams at quarterback. I like Miller Moss, but he's not Caleb Williams. I think they'll be better. I think they'll surprise some teams in the Big Ten and be better on the defensive side. I probably see about a 9-3 season from them, but we'll get into that a little bit more when I do my college football preview and when I do my conference breakdowns here in a few weeks. But Things aren't great now at USC, but I don't think they're that far away. And I think the problems that they have can be fixed. First thing you do, be better on defense this year. I think that helps in recruiting, of course. You get more defensive players, and then that will help going forward as well. And then figure out the NIL issue. If it ends up going to the revenue sharing, they don't really have to worry about it at that point. But if it takes a while to get to there, you need to figure out the NIL issue because you're USC. You need to start acting like USC. And that has been my show for today. Announcement. What I'm going to do this summer is in the upcoming shows that I'm going to have, whether it be next week or even the following week, I'm going to do division breakdowns in the NFL and conference breakdowns in college football. I'll try to get those episodes done before I get to my NFL and college football preview shows. But thank you for watching and listening. Of course, as a Sports Talk on a Budget, you can find it under that name on YouTube. Or if you prefer the audio version, find it under that name on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or basically wherever you get your podcasts. But thank you again for watching and listening to the show, and have a great day.